Okay, so good afternoon. My name is David Walton with the Tompkins Chamber. I am our event and program manager, and I am very pleased to see you all here today. For the next webinar in our COVID-19 Business Reopen and Recovery series, today we will be providing information for employers and employees on unemployment insurance support. Joining us to present today is Ms. Mary McLaughlin. Mary is a workforce development specialist with the Tompkins County Workforce New York. And today she'll be providing an overview for unemployment insurance and pandemic unemployment assistance under the CARES Act. Just a brief overview. Some of the topics we'll be discussing today is how to apply for unemployment insurance. Mary will be going over some helpful FAQs and tips, as well as next steps for moving forward with Workforce New York's individual workshops, free online training resources, and Tompkins Redirect and NYS DOL job search sites. Just a couple of small housekeeping things. Mary has a ton of information that she's going to go over today that's going to be super helpful. She has some slides for some visuals. We both know that people are going to have a lot of questions on this topic, but so that Mary has time to kind of go over everything, if you could please place your questions in the chat box. Some of those questions will be addressed by Mary's colleague, Ms. Cindy Sloan, and then some of them we'll answer at the end during a live Q&A with Ms. McLaughlin here on today's webinar. I think that's all I have. And if anything else comes up, please feel free to message me direct in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. We want to also, before we begin, give a huge shout out to our L.E.A.R.N series sponsor, Tompkins Trust Company. Without them, none of this would be able to be possible through the Chamber of Commerce. So we're super helpful for their financial support during this time. And on that note, without further ado, I want to go ahead and turn things over to today's presenter, Ms. Mary McLaughlin.
Thank you. Really glad to be here, and I hope this answers a lot of the questions you may have about how an employee could get started with the unemployment insurance process. You'll notice I am running captions. I apologize in advance. It and I don't always get along, so you will see some funny stuff going on in the captions. Please use the chat feature besides asking questions to ask for any clarification if you rely on those captions to understand what's going on in the presentation. If you have questions and you're tuning in by phone only, please just make sure you jot down your questions so you have a chance to jump in and ask those before we get started. I guess I'll start by explaining what Tompkins Workforce New York is, just in case you're not familiar. Tompkins Workforce New York is a part of the nationwide American Job Center network. Basically, the idea is to make it a one-stop shop for anyone who has anything to do with the workforce. So that could be a job seeker. So we provide resources to help someone who needs to look for work, look for that work, find a job, or get ready to compete for a different job from what they're doing right now. But we also work directly with businesses to help businesses grow and expand their workforce and also skill up their workforce. So for us, customers are not just people who need help writing resumes or figuring out how to fill out an online job application. Customers are also people who have a position they are trying to fill and are looking for new ways to actually communicate those openings and find great candidates. The goal of the presentation you're going to see was to remind people who lose their jobs or see a huge reduction in their scheduled work hours, learn how to access unemployment benefits. The big thing is that most people who have lost their jobs or again seen a major reduction in their work schedule are eligible for some form of unemployment assistance, and they need to apply for those benefits in order to be deemed eligible and figure out what they are actually eligible for. Tompkins Workforce New York is more than happy to help answer people's questions about how to apply for unemployment benefits and then what their next step should be after they get their application submitted. Connecting with us right now is easy. You can either call us at 607-272-7570 and leave a message with your name, phone number, and a quick rundown of what has you calling. And then we respond by 4:30 p.m. the next business day. Or you can go to our website, tompkinsworkforceny.org, and use the contact us form to send us an email through our website. And again, we're responding to those messages by 4:30 p.m. the following business day. Career centers across the state are kind of, at this point, slated to be in the last tier of the reopening process. And I don't know for sure, but I believe the state's intention is to open all of the career centers at the same time across the state, which means even if the region has opened up, the career center may not be. And that has a lot to do with maintaining unemployment insurance eligibility and making sure everyone has equal and equitable access to those offices. Before we jump into the application process for unemployment, I just want to talk a little bit about the different forms of unemployment assistance that are currently available. Most people are familiar with unemployment insurance benefits. This is the unemployment assistance or the jobless assistance that is usually available in the state of New York. But it's recognized that not everyone who loses their job is going to be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. So when the CARES Act was passed, it had 3 different types of jobless assistance that were built right in as a way to expand who was eligible for unemployment assistance across the country, but then also to expand what kind of benefits were available. So besides unemployment insurance, which is UI and what is normally available, the CARES Act built something called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA for short. Pandemic Unemployment Assistance has all of the same rules for that regular unemployment insurance benefits do in terms of eligibility, but they expanded who would be able to access those benefits. So people who are normally not eligible for unemployment, such as people who were self-employed, contract workers or gig workers, people who maybe haven't worked particularly long, enough to build up the income needed to qualify for regular unemployment, people who have no work history at all but were scheduled to start a new job as well, and then couldn't because of COVID-19, all of a sudden became eligible for some form of unemployment assistance through pandemic unemployment assistance. Basically, the rules for PUA are simple. You have to apply for unemployment insurance benefits first and be determined ineligible for unemployment insurance benefits before you can be considered for pandemic unemployment assistance. And in the early stages of that process, the state of New York actually had 2 different applications that needed to be filled out. You would fill out the application for UI, and then you would be told you're not eligible for UI, here's the application for PUA. After a couple of weeks of that, they realized that wasn't a great system, and they rolled both applications together into the same process, which is what you're going to see today. They still look at your eligibility for unemployment insurance first before they look at PUA, but at least now you only have to fill out 1 application. So that saves folks a little bit of time there. The CARES Act also put out 2 forms of unemployment assistance that were designed to respond to the economic impact of job loss in a more supportive way across the board. First, they rolled out something called Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, PUC for short. Pandemic Unemployment Compensation is an additional $600 a week that is paid out to anybody who is eligible for either unemployment insurance benefits or pandemic unemployment assistance between April 5th, 2020 and July 31st, 2020. There was no extra application process involved with this. Basically, if you were found to be eligible for unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment assistance, right away, not only would you get your regular weekly benefits through either of those funding sources, you would also get a second deposit of $600. And that $600 is available as long as you were eligible for at least $1 of benefits from either UI or PUA. The other piece that the CARES Act put out was Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PEUC for short. And PEUC amounts to a short extension of eligibility for your regular benefits through PUA or UI. Essentially, if you exhaust all of the funds available to you, which is for most people about 26 weeks of full-time benefits, You could receive up to an extra 13 weeks of benefits at your regular weekly rate up until December 31st, 2020 is the expiration date on that, which means if you run out of your regular UI or your PUA benefits on September 1st, you would be eligible for extended benefits through December 31st or through 13 weeks, whichever came first. And there is no separate application necessary for pandemic emergency unemployment compensation unless you were one of the rare cases where you already had a claim open when you lost your current job and that claim ended somewhere in the middle of the process. You would need to file a new claim at that point. It didn't kick in automatically, but there were very few cases that ran into that. So again, as we go through the presentation, you'll hear me talking about unemployment insurance benefits and pandemic unemployment assistance, and they may be referred to as regular weekly benefits in either case. Pandemic unemployment compensation refers specifically to that additional $600 a week being paid between April 5th and July 31st of this year. And pandemic emergency unemployment compensation doesn't get touched on very much in this presentation, but that's that additional number of weeks of benefits that are available to folks who need them should they exhaust their regular weekly benefits before December 31st of this year. If you're trying to figure out if you should file for unemployment insurance benefits, or if someone's trying to figure out if they should file for unemployment insurance benefits, right now the questions you have to ask are really easy. Did you work at all in New York State in the last 18 months? Did your job end, or did you start working less than 4 days a week, or was a job that was supposed to start postponed because of COVID-19? If you answered yes to both of those questions, you're probably someone who's going to be eligible for some form of unemployment assistance. But we do encourage everyone who has stopped working or stopped working less than or stopped working more than 4 days in a week to go ahead and file for unemployment. Even if you know that normally you're not eligible for unemployment benefits, again, it's worth your time to apply because of the unemployment additions that came through the CARES Act. Most people who apply for unemployment do so at the website, which is unemployment.labor.ny.gov. Some people do choose to apply over the phone by calling 888-209-8124. The questions you're going to be asked, the information you'll have to provide really is the same between either application format, but what the outcomes will look like for you will be just a little bit different. And where there are huge differences, we touch on those during the presentation. To get started filing your application online, you'll be asked to log in using a NewYork.gov ID. This is an online username and password that's created to interact with not just the Department of Labor, but with the state of New York. What that means is that people may already have a NewYork.gov ID from previous unemployment insurance or shared work claims in the past, but also from working with state agencies like the Department of Motor Vehicles, for example. If you've done any online business, you've got a username and password already. Also, Tax and Finance uses the same login system if you apply or you submit your tax returns directly through the NewYork.gov ID system. It's that same username and password. If you're not sure if you've already got an account, you can always use the Forgot My Username tool, which is right underneath the sign-in button when you get to unemployment.labor.ny.gov, and you'll be asked for some prompts and emailed information about usernames you may have. If you can't remember your password, you can also reset your password using the Forgot Your Password tool. And again, it just asks you for a little bit of identifying information and then usually gives you options for resetting your password. If you don't have an account, if you've already established that, or if you know for a fact you don't have a NewYork.gov ID, you can use the Don't Have an Account button, also right on the sign-in page to get started with that. To create a NewYork.gov ID, you are going to need to have your own email address, and you will be asked to check that email as a part of the account creation process. The big thing I'll put out here is remember that creating a New York.gov ID is not the same thing as filing for unemployment insurance benefits. I've encountered a couple of people who've created their username and password, added some profile details, and then not received unemployment insurance benefits because they never actually submitted an application. So just remember, it's a multi-step process if you have to create that account. If you can't log into your account even after you've tried resetting your password, or if you're having trouble creating the account because the system claims your social security number is already in use, even though you know you haven't done that, you can email jobzone@labor.ny.gov for assistance in getting that sorted out. We haven't run into too many people who run into this issue, but it has been really helpful for the few folks who have needed that. There are some handouts we created to support people who watch this presentation, which includes a list of information of what you would want to send to the Job Zone folks if you needed help with your New York.gov ID. Before you get started with your application for employment, whether you do that over the phone or online, I've got a short list of things you'll want to take into consideration. First, if you don't have reliable internet access at home, don't apply online. Those folks who don't have reliable internet access should instead go ahead and use the phone system and call 888-209-8124 to get started with their claim. You can apply online using a mobile device, but most people find that the screens on their phones are way too small to comfortably navigate the application. So we usually encourage folks to use a tablet or bigger. And if your internet only comes through your mobile device, you could try turning your phone into a hotspot to access the internet from something with a big screen. Most people who file online report having a much more pleasant experience if they use Google Chrome or Firefox instead of Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge. The information you'll need to get your claim started is actually pretty simple. You're going to need your social security number, your driver's license, or non-driver ID number, have either for the state of New York. You'll need your complete mailing address and zip code, a phone number where you can be reached between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. If you're not a citizen, you'll need your alien registration number. If you were a federal employee in the last 18 months, you'll definitely need your SF8 and SF50. If you've been separated from military service in the recent past, a DD-214 is very helpful at this point. If you filed for unemployment insurance or shared work in the past, you'll need to know your PIN number for that. And if you've never had a claim for unemployment or shared work before, you'll be asked to create a 4-digit PIN as a part of the application process. Make sure you pick something that's easy to remember but hard for other people to guess. And if you choose to have your benefits sent to you by direct deposit, you'll want to make sure that you're sitting down with your bank routing and account numbers handy at that same time. The day of the week that you file and the time of day that you file actually depends on whether you're going to file online or over the phone. If you choose to file online, you can start a claim between 7:30 in the morning and 7:30 at night, any day of the week. But if you're going to file over the phone, Monday through Friday, you can start your claim between 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. And on Saturdays and Sundays, you could actually start that claim between 7:30 in the morning and 8 at night. The day you file is based on the first letter of your last name. This is definitely best practice for over the phone, but we are seeing people have better experiences if they follow this same process if they're choosing to file online. In essence, the alphabet system goes like this. A through F should file on Mondays, G through N should file on Tuesdays, O through Z should file on Wednesdays, and again, that's the first letter of your last name, and then anyone could file on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. The day of the week that you file doesn't impact anything about when you get your benefits, when your claim is dated, or anything like that. Really, the goal here is simply to reduce the traffic trying to access the system any given day of the week, to limit people's experiences of being kicked off of the system or being told that the system is busy and being hung up on. When you should actually file in terms of when you lose your job or see that reduction in work as opposed to the actual day of the week. Basically what they say is you should file at the end of the week where you saw that change. So if you lost your job this week, you would file for unemployment insurance benefits this week as long as you worked less than 4 days and you earned less than $504 gross. So if you worked 4 days this week and then on Friday they said, oh, by the way, see you later, bye, don't come back, you wouldn't be able to start until next week. Some other tips. If you file online, make sure you're reading each question in that application carefully. Some of them are worded a little funny. It can help to read questions out loud. For filing online, you're going to want to make sure you sign into your online account at least every other day and use the message system that's built into your account to check and make sure nobody from unemployment is trying to reach out to you for more information. If you choose to file over the phone, you're going to want to sit someplace very quiet, like a car or a closet with the doors closed and by yourself. If you can, mute the microphone on your device, and then whenever possible, use the keypad on the device to answer questions that come through. That's because the voice recognition system is very, very sensitive. So it can hear dogs barking, throats being cleared, and it interprets that as an answer that can be difficult to correct. PIN numbers and usernames and passwords for NYork.gov ID should never be shared with anyone. If you need help and you need to share this login information with someone to get help going through the application or certifying for weekly benefits or communicating with unemployment in the future, it's okay to share that information with your helper, but you must physically be with them each time your helper accesses your information about unemployment. That is because you are held accountable for the actions of your helper, meaning if the person who has your PIN number calls and certifies for benefits that you're not eligible for, it is you who is on the hook for that overpayment, not the person who actually did the calling in. After you got your NYork.gov ID all set up, or after you've gotten your PIN set up, if you're going through the phone system, you will be read some terms and conditions for your application for unemployment insurance benefits. There are a few exceptions to those terms and conditions, but your obligation is to read the claimant handbook after you have submitted your claim to see if you happen to be one of the people who doesn't have to follow a particular condition of the application. If you think you do qualify as being one of the people who doesn't have to follow all of the terms and conditions, you have to communicate with the Department of Labor staff to confirm that. You can't just say, well, my coworker didn't have to, so I don't have to. You are responsible for confirming that for your own particular case. The unemployment insurance application is pretty straightforward. It lets you move forward through your application, and it does let you save an application and come back to it later if you're going online. This is not the case if you go over the phone. So if you need to walk away from the online application, you don't have to lose all of your work. You can save it and come back, which is quite nice. If you realize you made a mistake or you wanted to check an answer you gave before in the online application, you can move backwards by using the previous button on the bottom left-hand side of the application, but only use that previous button. Please do not use the back button on your browser. Otherwise, you could risk losing some of the information that is in your online account or in this application and have to start over. With the phone system, you don't have the ability to move backwards or save information. What happens is at the end of the phone application, you'll be read a summary of everything you shared, and if there's a mistake, you'll get a chance to correct it then. The personal information you get asked for at the start of the application is pretty straightforward. Basically, it's just who you are, what names you have worked under, what your date of birth is, the number of employers you've worked for in the last 18 months. This information at this stage is just used to make sure they're accessing all of the different records available to make sure they're getting a good idea of what your wages have been for the last 18 months, which impacts what your weekly benefits will be for unemployment insurance and pandemic unemployment assistance. It's important to note at this stage that if you were self-employed in the last 18 months, you do count yourself as one of the employers asked about in this personal information section. After that, the application dives into a little bit deeper information about yourself. Make sure that you read the directions carefully. In particular, unemployment needs to know your mailing address more than your actual physical address, and they need a phone number where you can consistently be reached. If you don't use the phone, there's actually a way to say, I don't have a phone number. The reason why this matters is that if unemployment staff need to speak to you to complete your claim, to send you any information, to send a questionnaire, to mail you your direct payment card for benefits, this is the information they will use. So you need to not only double check it, you need to quadruple check this information to make sure nothing gets lost in the mail, literally. This personal information section is also where you get asked about your citizenship. It is possible to qualify for unemployment insurance benefits without being a U.S. citizen, but you will be asked to provide your alien registration numbers as a part of the application if you're not a citizen. At this stage in the application, you will also be asked if you would like to have taxes withheld for the IRS and for New York State. They are two separate options, so you can opt into one and not out of the other. Generally speaking, they withhold about 10% for federal taxes and 2.5% for New York State taxes. It is taxable income, so if you don't pay taxes on it up front, you will have to pay taxes later on when you file in 2021. Instead of getting a W-2 for unemployment insurance benefits or pandemic unemployment assistance, instead what you are going to get is a 1099-G. Those are not automatically mailed to you. To get a 1099-G next spring, what you will need to do is sign into your NewYork.gov ID to download a copy, or contact the telephone claim center at 888-209-8124 to request a copy be mailed to you. Sorry, I know I'm going through really fast. I just want to make sure we get it all. You may be asked about your earnings. For everything you earned in 2019 up until the day you file in 2020, you will be asked if all of the money you earn came from running your own business. You will be asked if all of the money you earn came from being self-employed. And you may be asked if you earned any money in that time frame from working for someone else. And again, this is a part of the eligibility process between unemployment insurance benefits and pandemic unemployment assistance. And then do keep in mind that if you have had any recent self-employment or contract employment in the recent past, part of the follow-up from unemployment may include asking for some extra information about your wages during that period. What questions you get asked in the unemployment application can actually vary a little bit depending on how you answer other questions. So for example, if you said that yes, some of your employment in the last 18 months or so came from working for someone else, you'll be asked a little bit of information about your former employer. Chiefly, was any of your wage for that time period not reported on a W-2? And then if that's the case, they'll ask you for some specific contact information for that particular employer. If none of your income came from working for someone else, you won't be asked about your former employer. Everyone is being asked about their ability or availability or opportunities for telework. Basically, you will be asked if you were given the opportunity to telework for the same hours of your customary job. And you will also be asked if you were receiving any form of paid leave, and that includes sick pay, emergency leave, holiday pay, vacation time, anything like that. Basically, if your employer was paying you money along the lines of your regular paycheck or even close to your regular paycheck, but you weren't going to work, you're still considered employed even though you're not working. And if your employer gave you the opportunity to telework and you turned that down, you may find you get asked more information about why you turned down that telework opportunity before you're determined to be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. Do remember, of course, that if you answer everything in your application for unemployment, you submit your application, and then 2 days later, your employer says, oh, guess what? Situation X, Y, or Z is different from what we thought. You do need to contact unemployment directly to update them on your change in circumstances. For example, a common one is, I've worked with a lot of folks who've been laid off. They think they're not going to be paid anything at all. And then a couple weeks in, their employer says, we're going to send you paid leave for the next 4 weeks. Those folks do have to contact unemployment with that update, for example. part of the state of New York's response to COVID-19, besides, of course, implementing pandemic unemployment assistance and the rest of the CARES Act jobless benefits, actually was to say that they would waive the unpaid waiting week for unemployment insurance claimants who were filing for unemployment because their work was impacted by COVID-19. So one of the questionnaires that comes up that flexes depending on your answers is a whole section about how COVID-19 is impacting your work. This is used again to figure out if the unpaid waiting week can be waived for you. So whether your benefits will start immediately or whether there's a 1 week lag in your benefits. But then also this is used to help determine your eligibility if you're found not eligible for unemployment insurance benefits, to look at pandemic unemployment assistance instead. So these questions ask if COVID-19 actually caused your business to shut down or have to reduce the amount you could work, whether the impact COVID had has to do with, say, a lack of childcare. For example, if the school's closed and you had to stop working because you didn't have any to take care of your child, whether you needed to stop working to take care of a family member who was sick, whether you became ill yourself. These questions kind of help figure out where you fall into how your benefits are going to be funded and whether or not that unpaid waiting week can be skipped. And again, you probably will not be asked all, I think it's about 8 questions about COVID-19. You'll be asked questions based on what your responses have been to the last COVID-19 related questions. At this point, you will also be asked if in the last 18 months you've been separated from military service or from federal employment, and you may be asked for some extra details about those circumstances. I do want to make it known that when the state of New York waives your unpaid waiting period, they don't actually just completely skip it altogether. What they do instead is they backdate your claim by 1 week. So you get credit for your unpaid waiting week for the last week you were working. So if you were online checking your payment history, checking out your claim status, you would actually see that your claim is dated for the week before you lost your job. And you may see an unpaid week flagged for that week, that last week that you were working, and it's confused a lot of folks. So just because they waive your unpaid waiting week, it doesn't mean you're not going to see it in your payment history, but it should align with the last week you were working. You will be asked about your availability. Basically, they want to know if you were working part-time in your previous job. And if so, how many hours a week you were working on average. That's because if you normally work only part-time, especially for the last 18 months that you were working, you're not required to be looking for full-time work if you're required to be looking for work while on unemployment insurance benefits. You're actually allowed to choose to focus specifically on jobs that have schedules that are comparable to what you had before. So this is your opportunity to go on record saying that you were working part-time at your last job and this is how many hours you were working. There is a question in the availability section that does trip a lot of people up, so I just want to zoom right in on it for a second. The question reads, are you unemployed for COVID-19, but otherwise able and available to work? The question is asking, if COVID-19 wasn't a thing, are you ready, willing, and able and available to start work immediately or to return to work for your most recent employer if that's the arrangement you have immediately? Answering yes means that right now, if someone called me up and said, hey, come into work, I could do it. Answering no means, even if COVID-19 didn't exist, if someone called me up and said, hey, come into work right now, I would have to say, I can't. And again, you get an opportunity to explain why your answer is what it is. But again, just be aware you may be asked for follow-up if you have to say that you're not ready, willing, and available to start work immediately, COVID-19 aside. At this point in the application, if you're filing online, you will be asked how you'd like to see your benefits sent to you. You have the option to have a Key 2 benefits debit card mailed to you, or you can set up direct deposit. The Key 2 benefits debit card is automatically assigned to you. It's usually mailed in a plain white envelope about 7 to 10 business days after you're approved for benefits. So for most people, what they see is that card shows up in the mail and there's almost always at least 1 week's worth of benefits, sometimes 2, on that card waiting for them to access. You don't have to have a key bank account. It's all right there. If you've had unemployment or shared work in the past and that Key 2 benefits card has expired or it's been lost, you have to contact the Key Bank customer service office to get that sent to you. Again, and that number is 866-295-2955. With direct deposit, setting it up is pretty simple. It's your responsibility to make sure that all of the payment information is correct. That's because if the payment bounces, unemployment usually will mail you a benefits card with those benefits on altogether that bounce back. However, if it doesn't bounce, let's say you accidentally put in someone's account information that isn't yours, but it's a real account, that money went through. As far as unemployment is concerned, they usually don't do anything to try and recover those funds so that you get them. So triple check your direct deposit information if you choose to enter it. Important things to note: if you don't set up direct deposit when you first start your claim, you may not be able to set it up until after your first payment has been released, which means if you don't set it up right away, you're going to get at least one benefit payment on the Key 2 benefits card before you can set it up for direct deposit instead. If you choose to file for unemployment insurance benefits over the phone, you will have the Key 2 benefits debit card mailed to you automatically. You can't set up direct deposit over the phone. There is one question that asks specifically about your annual net income for the most recently filed tax year. This is specifically used to help determine your benefit rate if you turn out to be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance instead of unemployment insurance. Make sure when you answer this question that you use all earned income, including income from self-employment, running your own business, working multiple jobs. And again, it's used to calculate your benefit rate. For people who haven't worked for, haven't been self-employed, usually it's line 1 right off of your most recent 1040. For people who have been self-employed, it's usually line 31 of Schedule C. That's the information they're looking for there. And again, if you wind up being eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance, you may be asked for some extra information breaking down more details about your wages. If you think you might be one of those folks who's going to be asked for that information, let's say you were self-employed for the last 18 months and that was it, you can get a head start on what you may be asked for by filling out a request for reconsideration. Don't submit it. It simply asks for a lot of the same information that gets asked for folks who need some extra details about their annual net income. So it's a nice little organizer for you. For a lot of people who are filing unemployment right now, they actually wind up filing for unemployment after the time frame that they should have, just because of how slow the system has been, how slow it has been to get the word out that they may be eligible, and also because a lot of them, again, qualify to have that unpaid waiting period waived. So the online application, and I believe the phone application as well, may ask you to certify for weekly benefits for the last week that you worked. Do pay careful attention to the dates you were asked about in that weekly certification, and again, pay careful attention to the way the questions are framed. This has everything to do with figuring out if you were eligible for benefits that particular week to get a head start on getting payments released to you. Do remember that one of the questions you are going to be asked is how many days did you receive sick leave or other paid leave benefits from your employer? And they literally mean any other form of paid leave benefits. So if your employer let you use holiday, vacation pay, sick leave, if they came up with some emergency paid leave funding because of COVID-19, for example, and you were paid out on that, you do need to report that as a day of paid leave that you received or used. Once you've completed that weekly certification, the online application will let you review everything you shared. The phone system will read you a summary of everything you've shared. This is your last chance to double check and make any changes before you submit your claim for processing. So pay careful attention to what you're agreeing to. And again, both the online and the phone system close out the application before you submit it with a bunch of legalese in fine print or fairly rapid talking. Make sure you pay attention to this certification before you submit your application. It is legally binding and it does explain what's expected of you moving forward, and nobody likes nasty surprises. After you've submitted your claim for processing, you will see or hear a confirmation message. This message just means that the information you provided to the phone system or to the online application was submitted for processing. The confirmation message does not mean that you are eligible for benefits, and it doesn't even mean, unfortunately, that your application is complete. So read and listen carefully to the message. If you have to speak to a representative to complete your claim, the confirmation message will tell you that. And at this point, those representatives are calling you back. So it may give you a rough idea of how long to wait for someone to call you. It will also remind you to regularly check your mail. It will remind you that if you filed online, you should be signing in and checking your message center through the NYYork.gov ID often. I would say at least every other day. If it doesn't, the message should also let you know that phone calls to complete claims are happening every day of the week, all 7 days, Monday through Friday between 8 in the morning and 7:30 at night, Saturdays and Sundays between 7:30 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. Those phone calls may come from a 518 number, but they may also appear as a blocked number or not having any caller ID. That's because most of the staff from unemployment are still working from home, so they're calling you from their personal device and they've blocked the number so you can't call them back later when they're trying to sleep. If you are not required to speak to a representative to complete your claim, the confirmation page or message will include instructions for how to claim or certify for your weekly benefits. Listen again very carefully to those instructions to make sure you don't miss any important steps. Generally speaking, the instructions sound a little something like certify online or over the phone the following Wednesday and then every Sunday thereafter. You can certify online by going to labor.ny.gov/sign-in, or you can call a phone number to claim your benefits. And which number you call will depend on whether you're going to be receiving unemployment insurance benefits or pandemic unemployment assistance. The confirmation message should give you a sense of which way your benefits are going to go depending on the phone number it's given you. If you can't certify on a given Sunday, it is acceptable to certify any other day of that same week up until Saturday. The information you're going to be asked about should still cover the same week in question. Remember, you're always certifying for the week that just ended, and weeks for unemployment run from Monday to Sunday. If you're told you have to wait for a call to complete your claim, what you're going to be asked about when you get that phone call depends a little bit on your circumstances and what information wasn't available to the computer system. But I've got a short list of stuff that most people have found helpful. A calendar that covers the last 18 months, a pen and paper are really helpful for double checking dates and writing down any special instructions you may have to follow. Some folks have needed the names and addresses of all of their employers for the last 18 months, including employers in other states. You will also need the first and last dates of employment for each employer in that time period, including yourself. If you were self-employed during any point in the last 18 months and they ask for those details, you could just say self-employed when you get asked for the employer name and then give your home or business address as well as your home and business phone number if it's requested. You may be asked for the employer registration or federal employer identification numbers for your most recent employer. The FEIN is found right on your W-2s. You may be asked to confirm that you earned more than $4,500 in gross pay from your most recent employer, especially if you weren't let go due to a lack of work. If you were self-employed and they are very insistent you need to provide an FEIN, you could use EF number 9923246. I haven't had many people needing it, but just in case, it's right there for you. You may be asked to provide wage information for all employers, again, including yourself, for the last 18 months. And if you were self-employed or an independent contractor, your net annual income from your most recent tax year may be what you get asked for. And again, that's line 31 of Schedule C in your 1040. When you certify for weekly benefits, whether you do that over the phone or you do it online, the questions you get asked are pretty easy. Remember, you're certifying for the week that just ended, and weeks run from Monday through Sunday, but do pay careful attention to the dates you get asked about in that certification process, because that can be a good cue that you've accidentally missed a week that you were supposed to claim benefits, and will keep you from making mistakes in terms of your eligibility for benefits. If you work part-time, your weekly benefits, your regular weekly benefits, so that's your UI or your PUA, will be adjusted based on the number of days that you worked. It doesn't matter how many hours you worked in that time period. It doesn't matter how much you get paid. It gets adjusted based on the number of days you reported to work. Basically, for each day that you report, your weekly benefits will be reduced by 1/4. So if you work 4 days any given week, you don't receive any regular weekly benefits that week at all. If you work 2 days in that week, you'll get half your regular weekly benefits. And if you earn more than $504 gross working for someone else, you don't receive any unemployment insurance benefits at all that week. That adjustment happens on a week-to-week basis, and it is only used to calculate your weekly benefit rate for either unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment assistance. Pandemic unemployment compensation stays at $600 a week every single week, unless your regular weekly benefit gets reduced to zero because you earned more than $504, or because you worked more than 3 days in a week. If your regular weekly benefit is $0, so is your pandemic unemployment compensation for that week. The nice thing is that with the regular weekly benefits, days that you are not eligible for benefits, the amount that you should have been paid for that day remains available for you to use later on. So for example, if you're working 2 days a week, it'll take you a whole year to exhaust your unemployment insurance benefits. Whereas if you weren't working at all, it would take you 6 months to exhaust those benefits. Again, if you choose to certify for your weekly benefits over the phone, make sure you're sitting someplace quiet and use the keypad to respond whenever possible with your microphone muted. Do again pay careful attention to the way questions are asked to avoid making a mistake when you claim your benefits. The only way to fix a certification error is to talk to the telephone claims center. Right now, that's taking a long time to get through to a person over the phone, and it's taking a long time to hear back if you choose to email them with your questions.
Mary, I have a question.
Sure.
Someone is self-employed, not earning a paycheck from someone else, but from themselves. They're earning less per week than normal, but still earning more than 504 gross. Are they eligible?
Self-employment only is actually something I don't know much about beyond the basics if work completely stops for you. If you were still working, the question becomes how many days a week are you working, because they count earnings from self-employment a little differently at the unemployment office, simply because for a lot of self-employment, the days you work don't always line up with when you get paid. So I would say if you are working less than 4 days in a week, it would probably be worth your time to submit that application. You'll have the opportunity to disclose that you're earning more than 504 a week for self-employment. And if it's going to impact your eligibility, they won't pay you, so you don't have to worry about an overpayment. But if it doesn't impact it, then you've at least got your hat in the ring for some extra support through unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment assistance benefits.
Thank you.
If you're having trouble navigating the unemployment insurance application, or are interested in pursuing other opportunities at work, to work, having a tough time today, or your employees are kind of falling into that category, again, reaching out to Tompkins Workforce New York is one of the best ways to get questions answered, or at least get pointed in the direction of the expert who can answer those questions. Connecting with us is as easy as picking up the phone and calling 607-272-7570 and leaving a message, or filling out the contact us form at tompkinsworkforceny.org. Right now, we are not in the office, but we're responding to most folks' messages by 4:30 p.m. the following business day, if not sooner. Normally, at this point in the presentation for employees, I would actually show a short video that goes over some of the more popular services available to job seekers through Workforce New York. In the interest of time today, I will go ahead and skip that video, but if you're interested in seeing it, it's available online. I'm happy to send a link out or put that link in the chat later on today. Phew. Little legalese, and then we can jump right into the FAQ. This workforce product was funded by a grant awarded by the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. The product was created by Tompkins Workforce New York and does not necessarily reflect the official position of the U.S. Department of Labor. The U.S. Department of Labor makes no guarantees, warranties, or assurances of any kind express or implied with respect to such information, including any information on linked sites and including but not limited to accuracy of the information or timeliness, usefulness, adequacy, continued availability, or ownership. This product is copyrighted by Tompkins Workforce New York. These materials, created by Tompkins Workforce New York, are based on official guidance from the New York State Department of Labor and the shared experiences of Tompkins Workforce New York customers. Any unemployment-related information and guidance should be verified by visiting labor.ny.gov and reviewing official fact sheets, the claimant handbook, and announcements. We are also seeing that the New York State Department of Labor is very regularly posting official announcements and updates to Facebook and Twitter, often before those updates make their way onto the actual website. So we are encouraging folks to go ahead and take a look at those social media platforms as well. They're public access, so you don't have to have an account to be able to see that information. So at this point, are there other questions you want me to catch up on in the chat, Cindy?
There are none in the chat.
Great, so we can go ahead and open the floor up for FAQ. It is 12:54, so we may need to run a little bit over. If you're able to stay to do that to get your question answered, I'm happy to do so. The only thing is, if your question strikes you as being a particularly unusual case or requires you to share a lot of personal information about yourself or your employees, please don't use this form to ask that. Instead, go ahead and give us a call or shoot us a message so we can kind of have a more private conversation on the topic. If you're more comfortable using the raise hand tool to let me know you have a question, you're very welcome to do that.
I do think that given the nature, a lot of people may have like individualized or like personal questions, as you just stated, Mary. And in the event that people have some personal questions and wanted to get into contact with you direct, is there a slide that has like your or the Tompkins Workforce Office's number that we can put back up one more time for people? Or would you mind?
I can share that slide with our contact information again. That's no problem. I do usually recommend going ahead and going through the office instead of reaching out to me specifically. And that's just because, you know, if I happen to be unavailable any given day, I really don't want to see somebody waiting extra time to hear back. Whereas with reaching out to the office, information gets passed on to the most qualified person to answer a question and the, you know, next available person pretty much. So you're almost guaranteed to hear back faster than 4:30 that next business day. So the slide you're looking at right here reminds you of Tompkins Workforce New York, and then the bottom paragraph actually has our phone number and the link to our contact form directly. And I'll throw it in the chat for you if Cindy hasn't already.
She did.
There she is.
The number.
Great.
She's all over that.
Perfect.
I have a quick question. This is Jamie Shoemaker. If a company or organization is looking to do the work share program and receive the CARES Act funds, but is looking to expend them before the program goes into effect, do the CARES Act funds affect that in any way?
So the shared work program, if you set that up as an employer, your employees have access to pandemic unemployment compensation and pandemic emergency unemployment compensation automatically, because the funding for shared work comes from the same place that the funding for unemployment insurance does, at least in New York State. Now, if you are asking about CARES Act funding that was set aside specifically for employers to use, I'm not as familiar with those benefits, so I don't know how that overlaps with shared work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Jamie. Are there any other, actually, here's one that just came in. When looking at maximum benefits, does the $600 PUA count toward your maximum paid out benefits, or is this a separate payment?
So the $600 is PUC, and I know that sounds nitpicky, but with so many acronyms going around, it seems important. So $600 is PUC, and that goes on top of your maximum weekly benefit. So for someone completely and totally unemployed who had the right kind of earnings in the last 18 months, before taxes, they could be bringing in $1,104 a week between April 5th and July 31st of this year.
Awesome, thank you for that question. Are there any other questions? No such thing as a bad question on this topic.
Absolutely not.
All right. If there are no additional questions, just as a reminder, the number where the Tompkins Workforce New York team can be reached at is 607-272-7570. We want to thank Mary and Cindy both.
Wait. Is it Branka? I see a hand up.
Yes,
Oh.
I just have a quick question. Sorry, I'm late to ask
Thank you,
it.
Malcolm.
Yeah, so I was never asked what my wages actually were
Okay.
during the process of filling out the paperwork, or I don't think I missed the question because it probably wouldn't have let me proceed with the application. So it just calculated it to be to the 182 and the 600. Now I have a couple of questions. So the percentage of your so say you're earning, is it 60% of your weekly wages that they're paying out up to $504?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. And
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. And the other question I had is, when can I expect to have them follow up with me on my actual wages, or will they look that information up because I've been with my employer for the last almost 7 years, and they'll have filed tax returns and things like that?
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's an excellent question. Basically, how is my benefit rate calculated? Why wasn't I asked about my wages? And when could I expect follow-up if I think there's missing information? So the first piece is that for folks who have been for the last 18 months employed by an employer, that information is available to the New York State Department of Labor. And usually they don't really ask about wages specifically. Right now, as far as I know, the only question that even looks like that is simply, what was your net annual income at the end? And that's a fairly recent addition within the last 8 to 10 weeks, I think. So depending when you filed your claim, you may never have ever been asked that question. So yes, you certainly didn't miss something. It wouldn't let you move forward without adding information if it was needed. Your regular weekly benefit rate is calculated based on the wage information that is available to the system, or if you are required to follow up, what's provided during that follow-up conversation. And what they look at is, for the last 5 complete calendar quarters you worked, they start by looking at the first 4 of those 5 quarters. They look at wage information in there in terms of how much did you earn in each quarter and how much did you earn total across the board. And if it meets their criteria, they look at the highest of those 4 quarters and they divide it by they multiply it by 4 and then divide it by 26 to calculate your regular weekly benefit rate, which is a lot. And then if they, to process, sorry. And then if it doesn't look right, if there's not enough information or enough income, they look at the last 4 of the last 5 complete calendar quarters, and they use that same math to figure it out. Basically, right now, what's happening is if they look at all of those numbers and nothing lines up to make you eligible for regular unemployment insurance benefits, they will then switch you over automatically to PUA, and you would be looking at that 182 number, which is the lowest possible benefit rate you could get if you qualified for pandemic unemployment assistance. What should be happening is that once they've calculated what your weekly benefit rate will be, they will actually send you a monetary determination letter in the mail. And basically it says, if you are eligible for benefits, this is what we will pay you every week. Here is the wage information we looked at to figure that out. If there's a mistake, or if you see there's wage information missing, you have the ability to correct that wage information by filling out a request for reconsideration and sending that request for reconsideration back with proof of the income that you're adding to what they already had on file. This is especially common for folks who might be new to a particular employer, to folks who filed for unemployment insurance benefits really close to the start of new calendar quarter. And it can be pretty common for folks who work multiple jobs, especially people whose other job is self-employment or being a gig worker or being a contract worker. And usually when things are not crazy, that letter shows up within a couple weeks of turning in your application. Right now, we are seeing a pretty significant delay in when that letter is actually arriving, between when it's being printed and mailed at unemployment and what's happening with the post office. So if you think that that 182 is not right, there's a couple things you can do. You can, if you didn't get that monetary determination letter, you can actually go right to the Department of Labor's website, and they have a weekly benefit calculator, and you can plug in your wage information for the time period in question based on what you have available to you, and the calculator will give you a rough estimate of what your weekly benefit rate should be. And if it's not $182, you know that there's wage information missing. From there, what you can do is you can fill out that request for reconsideration and send it in to the unemployment office with supporting documentation. Usually pay stubs is plenty, or your W-2s, or sorry, not your W-2s, those work too, but your 1040s, especially if you were self-employed, or your 1099s if you were a gig worker or a contract worker. And basically the request for reconsideration basically says, hey, I think you guys are missing wage information. Here's everything I have. And they actually look at the math. They make sure they included all of the wages. They make sure that they can include all of the wages before they recalculate that benefit rate for you. What will happen is, while your request is being considered, they will keep paying you at whatever rate they determined you were eligible to begin with. And then if they realize that they actually should have been paying you more, they'll pay you retroactively for all of the benefits you should have been receiving but had not been.
Great. Thank you so much for answering all of that. That was very helpful.
Yes, and I can actually, if you give me just 1 second here, find you the link for the benefits calculator and the request for reconsideration. I'll throw it right in chat.
Thank you.
While you're putting that together, Mary, something around benefit calculation was a clarification was posted by McComber. Clarification: maximum benefits are calculated at 26 times the weekly UI rate. Are the PUC benefits added to the UI benefits when calculating maximum paid out benefits? Or are the maximum benefits calculated solely on the UI portion of what is paid out weekly?
Okay. So the maximum weekly benefit rate is calculated based on your wages. That is calculated before taxes come out. That is calculated before withholdings of any other form come out. So child support, your weekly benefit rate is calculated before they even look at that. Pandemic unemployment compensation, that $600 is automatically available, and it does not impact what your unemployment insurance benefits rate will be. So it's not used in the calculation process at all. It's added on at the end.
All right. Are there any other questions? We got a little bit of time left here for any additional ones. Bronca, thank you for raising your hand and for your great question, while Mary kind of pulls up some stuff on the calculator here.
And for anyone who's really interested in the nuts and bolts of weekly benefit calculation, you can actually open up the unemployment insurance claimant handbook. And it goes into a lot more detail of how they do the calculations. So what I gave you was the quick and dirty, if I'm in a hurry trying to get a number for somebody version. It is definitely not the official process. So the official process is laid out in the unemployment insurance claimant handbook. And there are certain wages that are not included when they calculate your benefit rate. And so the handbook also touches on what wages wouldn't be included when they're figuring that out.
Got it. All right. If there are no additional questions, I would again like to thank Mary and Cindy from Tompkins Workforce New York. Thank you, ladies, both for being here. Mary will actually be back with us next Wednesday. I think that's the 24th off the top of my head, looking at my calendar, where we will do the second part to this workshop, where we will take a deeper dive into the shared work program and answer any of those questions. Did you want to speak a little bit about that? Just a quick plug for that one, Mary.
The shared work version, we basically walk through the shared work application, which does have its differences from the unemployment insurance application. And we touch a little bit on some of the key points that are very, very different from unemployment. If you're looking for more exciting, more thrilling slides, I'm afraid it'll disappoint.
But it will educate and give you some perspective. So if you registered today, please feel free to register for that webinar next Wednesday. Same time from 12 to 1, same chamber channel on the Chamber's website. As I stated earlier, today's webinar will be made available on the Chamber's website and on the Chamber's YouTube channel, and I'll make sure that Tompkins Workforce New York gets that link as well. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you again to our sponsor, Tompkins Trust Company. And again, on behalf of the Chamber, you guys stay safe, stay well, and we will see you guys soon. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
You too.
Yeah.